stage of this session is that we're going to have a discussion here among ourselves, but we'll also open it up to the audience for questions. So be thinking of your questions as there are plenty of opportunities for me to engage with the colleagues. I suppose my first question, I suppose, to both of you is that you're both relatively new in starting off, and I'm just wondering, before you did go into the current partnerships or the current structures, how many actual proposals did you consider, and how did you decide, or what was the key criteria in deciding the ones that you eventually went for?
I suppose, yeah, we had looked at quite a few different things, you know, and all sorts of different, you know, there was leases, there was partnerships, there was share farm, there was all sorts of different things and different scales and different people and stuff. Like, I don't know, we probably looked it up to 10, I'd say, did we? Kind of over the course of 3 years. And yeah, I suppose, like as Katie had said, the people was a big thing, and sometimes we just went to a farm, and the farm could look nice, but the people could be just, you know, your first impression to be like, oh, and you know, maybe, you know, if you go ring a person or two, you'll find out pretty quick. Like, so yeah, I suppose the kind of the list of things we had was the people, you know, location, the size, and then I suppose the big thing for us was the, you know, the financial side of things too, and like that should be a big thing for everyone, really. But yeah, as Katie said, we had an Excel, and you know, if you kind of set up an Excel and you can just put in a few simple figures relevant to whichever farm you walk, and you know, gives you the result for it.
Yeah. And like just even touching on what David mentioned there, like the farm that we're on currently, we actually have been approached by the farm and the previous business owners of that farm 3 times with 3 different scenarios, and it just didn't work for us. And then Paudie and James approached us, and I suppose David had known Paudie and James, and they had a good reputation, and they offered us a very good package. You know, there was no to and fro. I suppose, like, the lads are farming down here near Charleville, so I suppose they needed someone fairly reliable to be farming 2.5 hours away, which is good.
Just to follow up on it before coming to you, Chris, you mentioned looking at share farming, long-term leases, partnerships. In your opinion, is there any pros and cons over one or the other when you were looking at those proposals?
I suppose the big thing for us in our position was getting going. Like, you know, we had a pot of savings, but it was kind of funny, you know, when things really got going. I suppose I left my manager's job in 2022, and price of stock and everything really got going that time. And a lot of money we had put together was worth less and less all the time. So I suppose, you know, and the fact that we had no security and stuff like that, then the likes of a partnership or share farming was kind of in a more manageable bite for us to take, rather than going and leasing a farm, you know, ourselves outright.
And your situation, Chris, for say how many proposals or how many opportunities did you look at before you decided this was the right one for you?
Yeah, I actually don't want to start counting up the amount of Excels I've done. I'd say going back probably 2017, there would come up a nice dairy unit for lease near home, and I put in a proposal for that, and that was probably the first one. And for various different reasons, there was like that, there was partnership opportunities, there was leasing opportunities, and for 1 or 2 reasons they didn't work out. Maybe it was geography, maybe it was you know, the scale and cost of actually getting into the business, and you know, for various different reasons it didn't work out. But I'd say it was easy and well to do that. You know, I think you are going to have to go through, you're going to have to kind of wade through the muck a bit to find the right one. And exactly what Katie said, like a few people said to me, like we're dealing in the farm, we have about 50% peat in nature, so it's quite wet in the shoulders of the year, and it obviously brings its own challenges. And you know, people said to me, you know, you're not held on and try and find a drier farm or go to a different part of the country. But myself and Tony, the landowner, get on like a house on fire, and myself and Tony, the landowner, get on like a house on fire. And for me, one thing I'd always say to anyone that asked me was, the person's far more important than the farm. Like, if you get a, you know, beautiful farm and modern facilities, great herd of cows, can't get on with the landowners, it's no good.
And when you're wading through that book, trying to evaluate which is the right opportunity for you, what is the main criteria that you're looking for? Obviously, it has to give a return. but are you factoring in the term that you're going to be there, the amount of money you have to put in, the capital expenditure, the soil fertility, etc., all that factor comes into it?
Yeah, all of them things really, and like I suppose the thing we came across was, there was people farming away, for 20 or 30 years, but the investment, Katie mentioned this, the investment in farming kind of waned off quite a bit, and the regulatory environment has changed quite a bit too, and it's like, we couldn't, we didn't have the firepower to go in and spend, 250 or 300,000 on concrete and stuff, and try and get a business up and going as well. And that was kind of a problem we came across, and that probably put us out of some of them opportunities then, because there was people that had a few, had been milking cows elsewhere before, and they were in a better position than us. But we don't regret walking past them either.
And the ideal term that you want to?
So I suppose it depends. Like, our partnership is 5 years initially. Like, it depends on, partnership could be, a shorter term. Usually are shorter term, like the leasing. Then I suppose it depends on, it depends on how much money is to be spent and different things like that. So, you're probably talking 10 years as a minimum, and 15
The
plus.
longer you can get, the better.
Yeah.
Because at least if you do have to spend money, I suppose you can depreciate it out over the lease term.
And similar to that, Christopher, you were in there for a long term.
Yeah, so our arrangement is for 10 years initially, and with a review after year 7. And at that stage, Tony is going to make a decision whether he will take back the farm himself, or maybe his daughters or partners or whatever might decide that they want to farm again, and give me that kind of headway that I'll have 3 years to prepare for the next arrangement. Or if not at year 7, he might say, look, he doesn't know where his own circumstances will be. He might be happy enough to just say, look, I'm happy enough to step back and progress into a lease. So yeah, we would be tied in for a minimum of 10 years. And to be honest, I think for partnerships, there's probably a little bit more flexibility in it, because there's not that, the outlay of the lease, but any sort of lease opportunity, particularly with the capex involved, so 15 years.
And something you mentioned, Katie, in your presentation was the ability to grow your shareholding in the business over the next number of years. And I was here last night and also heard Michael Ward speaking, and one of the comments he made is giving the young people that opportunity to grow their equity or grow their business ownership, especially when they're starting out. How important was that for you, and you something similar, Chris?
Yeah, well, like the opportunity that lads gave us was, it was unbelievable, really. Like, so they offered us up to 25% of the business that we could buy into to start off. Usually, in a lot of management cases, you might have to work on a farm for 2-3 years, and then you might get lucky if you have to start off bottom, you have to start at 5%, and you build it from there. Whereas the lads gave us that opportunity to buy into up to 25%. So we were able to afford 24% last year and 25%. And the plan is that we're allowed to build by 5% every year for, let's say, the next 5 years, up to 50% of the business.
If we want to.
If we want to, yeah. So like our plan this year is they've allowed us to buy the 6%. So we will hopefully own 30% of the business. And that's the plan going forward, just to try and drive on with that, try and buy our 5% every year up to 50%, and it also makes the maths a lot simpler, even in terms of, it's a fair split then, when at the end of the year we have to go, through all the books, and, we're after purchasing a loader because we were leasing a tractor, and it actually, financially, when you did the figures on it, you had nothing at the end of it, so we're like, if we buy a loader, at least you've something to sell. So we did that, but just figuring out, well, we'll buy 24% of it, but then we'll have to buy 6% of it every year, even though it's depreciated. So the sooner we get to 50%, the easier it'll be. But we have 2 great lads behind us. Body's very good at all that kind of stuff, depreciating and figures, and we also have a great accountant who's good as well.
Sorry, you may not want to answer this, but when you buy 5% every year, is it 5% of the original valuation when you started the partnership first day?
Yeah, so 5% of the original. Now, if we left after 5 years, the depreciation would be taken into account of the business and what we're after buying for the last 5 years. But I suppose we put in the 5-year plan because, firstly, I was moving to Kilkenny from Galway, which was a huge step. So we just wanted to
Wish
push
to tell
that.
anybody.
Yeah. It is growing on me though, but I'll never call myself a Kilkenny woman. But I suppose we put the 5 year in place. I suppose it was kind of for everyone. I suppose so the lads knew they'd security, they'd someone to run the farm for the next 5 years. But it also meant that, like, you know, if we didn't like the farm or you know how things were running, or like, you know, we might have gone on with the lads after getting into business with them. You know, then we had the opportunity to actually step back after 5 years. But definitely after working there for the past year, we love the farm, we get on great with the lads, the landowners are easy, like they're sound people. Yeah, we don't see ourselves leaving it. It has been a very good investment for us, we think, yeah, and going forward.
Similar for your situation, Christopher?
Yeah, I suppose I count myself very lucky in a way because when I came into the business, I came in with roughly half the milking stock that we had year one, and obviously the landowner had the land. But I started straight away in a 50-50 share. Now the agreement was that we've done a CapEx project, put up with extra cubicles, and that's paid for by the partnership in lieu of me kind of starting out at a higher percentage and kind of getting the stock essentially. So from that point of view, I count myself very, very lucky. Within the partnership, there's probably not much more room to grow. I'm at 50%. So really, you know, unless we take on more land, you know, we can grow the business, you know, outside the business or into future opportunities. There's no way to be within the business more than where we're at.
Is there, I go to the audience, if there's any questions for the guys or even for myself, happy to take them. Question here in the front, if we can get a mic to you.
One of the difficulties for youngsters nowadays trying to get started is getting into the habit of saving to put a few bob by to get started. I'd like to ask the panel, how did they gather together the grub stake that started them off? Because this is the crux in 90% of the young people trying to get into farming is they haven't any savings or haven't enough savings to avail of the facilities that are available.
The big thing for me is any young person out there is wanting to try and get farming is just don't go and buy a big fancy car because you're throwing all your money on something that, you know, is going to be worth half its value in a few years' time. It's a big thing for us. If you're very serious, if you are serious about what you want to do and where you want to go, you will save. Definitely. That's what I found.
Yeah, I suppose in New Zealand I was lucky, you know, I got the opportunity to work with some very good farmers and they would have instilled that, you know, you needed to try and save a certain percentage of your salary, you know, maybe 50 or 60% or whatever. And I suppose that was probably something that stuck with me, and you know, I kind of tried to stick at it as best as I could, like, and with, you know, having that bit of savings, it's great for the likes of AIB or whoever you're banking with. They see, well, you know, this person has a bit of, you know, they have a bit of a track record of they're able to put money away, or you know, they're able to frugal, or they're frugal, or they can live well within their means, I suppose. And you know, it's something to bring in. You know, if an opportunity does come up, that you know, you have a bit of your own equity to put into it. But you know, I think, you know, putting away a bit of money, you know, maybe it's stuff like, you know, rare and young stock or something like that. I know that road is a bit trickier now than what it used to be, but just different things like that to put a bit of money together, and it's really, really important. Really important.
Yeah, I suppose from my point of view, when that first lease farm came up in 2017, I remember bidding on it, and it was probably a good thing I didn't get it, because I went into Paul Highland at the time in Barry Highland in AIB in Cavan, and I'd say when I told him I wanted 120 grand to go and buy cows, he laughed me out the door, because sure, I was only 21 and had no track record or anything like that. And the one thing he said to me at that stage was, if you can get 30% of what you want, we'll back you the rest of the way. And I suppose that was part of my own decision to kind of stay working in the industry job. There was opportunities to maybe go and work on farms. And like I said, I was kind of living at home. I don't think Lakeland mind me saying it at this stage. I had the van and the company car and everything else, and sure could put as much as I possibly could away. And then after doing that for 4 or 5 years, you know, buying the 100 heifers, 150,000, I had to show, once I was fit to show them that I had the 50 saved, they backed me for the other 100 that was there, aiming in the AIB and in the garden fair, back the whole way after that, and that's what got me started. It was, yeah, but you had to live through it, and you had to put as much money as you possibly could away.
And I suppose, to be fair, like from a banking perspective, the level of savings that a customer has built up may be the only track record or the only indications of how they will operate their farm business. As the guys have said, if you can show and demonstrate a savings record, a frugal spender, it's probably, and it can be the only indication, especially for, and there's a lot of young people in the room, when you're applying for that first loan facility, an unsecured facility, that level of savings and what you're bringing to proposal may be the only indication that we have to go on as a starting base. And as I say, once you get going and you develop your own track record, you produce your own set of accounts, you produce your own farm accounts, operate your own current account, then you're building your track record, and as Christopher said, you can go again after that, because the bank now know what they're dealing with in terms of their own, in terms of that efficiency that you can bring to operating your own farm.
Being a Cavan man with diseases, short hands and deep pockets, that helps as well.
I didn't want to say that. Anything else from the audience? Maybe while you're thinking of questions, both Katie and Christopher, you both worked off farm and left, as some may call it, I've heard in other conferences call it, the soft job. The motivation, obviously, wanting to work for yourselves and prove to yourselves that you can do it. But is there skills that you probably developed in the PAYE sector that are particularly relevant now to running your large-scale dairy operations?
From my point of view, the being on the PAYE, particularly in the Lakeland role, I had exposure to, you know, a lot of really good technical people, so it definitely helped the technical aspect of dairy farming before I ever made it. But my own personal skills, I think, from running the grass measuring business, I was measuring, or I was managing staff for multiple years before actually going into the farm. So the management staff in a scale of a business was definitely a big thing. I think that was one of the things that stood to me. And I suppose being on the PAYE job as well too, I suppose farming can be insular if you let it, and everyone thinks their farm is, you know, their pride and joy, and if they can't get out, everyone else to see that, they think they're wrong. Whereas I found when you're going looking for staff now, like, you have to be an employer of choice. You want people to want to work for you, and I suppose you've seen that by, you know, by being in employment, how to be a better employer.
Yeah, and I suppose my role in Chagas for 3 years, like, I learned so much, like, even like down to the technical. Obviously, the whole paperwork side of things, you know, that changes on a daily basis nearly at this stage. But yeah, no, working alongside like-minded people, and, you know, people that were very driven, and then you get to go out to farms, and, you know, you can see what people are doing and how they're achieving it. And you know, I was kind of like, you know, I could actually be one of those, you know, I might be the advisor, but, you know, I could actually be the farmer, and yeah, that really drove me on, yeah.
It's definitely something that we saw, particularly after the abolition of quotas and that expansion in the dairy industry that happened, and where farmers probably employed labour for the first time. They expected the labour unit to work every bit as hard as they did on their farm. And obviously that doesn't last long, particularly in an economy where we have full employment and we have other choices. And it is a skill, managing people, and a skill that has to be developed by if you want to manage that large-scale dairy operation. Mistakes that are made, if you were back again, what would you do differently?
It's not that we didn't make any mistakes. I suppose maybe this this isn't a mistake, but you know, I'd probably be a bit guilty of maybe not backing myself, I suppose. You know, like, you know, and I'm not going to blow myself up here either, but I suppose, like, you know, we have good experience between us. You know, like, I'm farming, you know, 10 years now in different, I suppose, different roles, and it's amazing what you kind of do see, and, you know, I was looking between New Zealand and, you know, the Greenfield and all these different places, and I suppose that, you know, when push comes to shove, then, you know, I would have been probably nervous enough going into the partnership in Cavan Sport. You know, it's like the Stockholm syndrome or something like that, but I suppose it's just, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are very capable of doing things, and it's just a case of, you know, backing themselves. And you know, you don't have to be cocky. It's just, you know, maybe a bit of belief in yourself. Like, so.
David is very good at what he does, like, and he doesn't give himself half enough credit for it. Like, you know, farming, like, outperformed itself. I don't think anyone expected to do what it done this, like, in 2025, and like, it is down to, you know, David. He is a different, he does not back himself at all.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, no, it's just kind of, you know, go out there and learn the skills, and, you know, try and maybe practice them for someone on someone else's farm, and maybe make the mistakes there. You know what I mean? But it's all, you know, it's all experience, and you're like, you know, you do something and make a decision, and you learn from that, and then.
Sorry, it's also very, like Michael Ward mentioned last night, that, like, you know, the young lads, they go and they mightn't come back, but like, he was very adamant that they do go, and like, I think that's really important for any young person to go, and like, if they do want to go farming, you know, don't go home straight away. Go and, like, you know, get some experience under your belt in different farms, and like, the amount of, like, tips and tricks and information you pick up from other farmers, like, it's something else. Like, so I just think be very mindful of that. Like, yeah.
This is probably a Kilkenny answer as well, but a mistake I see other people making is that. You know, like, the three of us here have been to New Zealand, like, and, you know, New Zealand has its flaws as well. You know, go off and do them things, and, you know, get away from under your mother's feet, and, you know, you'll learn how to do, you know, things, but you'll also learn a lot about farming and being exposed to the right people, and that exposure and that mindset is really, really important.
I like found exactly like David when I started in the partnership. Even though I went in and immediately we were equal partners, it took me probably the whole first year to actually see it as my business. I was always thinking, you know, if I make this decision, what will Tony think? What will Tony think? And to be fair, it wasn't that he was looking over my shoulder. He said to me day one, he says, you know, he inherited the farm quite young, I think he was 21. And he said, Dad always looked over, and why you do this and why you do that. He says, I'm not going to look over this. The farm's making money, and we're all happy with how things are going. He says, you're not going to hear from me. Which, for me, was a massive vote of confidence, but it still took that 12 months to actually see it as my own business. And I do now, like, I talk about my farm. Unfortunately, it might never be my farm, but that's the way I kind of view it as my business now, or our business, as I say. But it did take time to actually get into that role, and like what David said as well, with the experience, like, the industry job definitely helped me put money away, but I went into farming probably green from an experience point of view, and exactly what you said, the first mistakes I made was with my own one. Whereas you could have put your teeth somewhere else, built up your time, built up your experience, and yeah, it might have taken you a little bit longer to get the cash pool put together, but you would have had the experience. So, like, if I was a young person now, I would have no hesitation in saying, like, to start off as a dairy assistant, coming out of college and thinking you're going to rattle into a management job. Like, there's no shame in starting off on the bottom of the ladder once you have the ambition to climb it.
And just following on to that, and you're making the business decisions day to day on the farm, and your partnership is your partner is letting you at it. How does it work in your scenario in terms of the day-to-day decisions, and maybe any long-term decisions with regard to investment that needs not to farm with your partners?
So I suppose myself and Katie are very much so left at it, day-to-day decisions. You know, there's very little, you know, to and fro there. I suppose that in terms of long-term investments and stuff like that, usually Pauline James will come up to Kilkenny and we'll just all sit down and crash through things and see, get people's opinions and have a debate about that kind of stuff. I suppose we're lucky, like the four of us are fairly like-minded and kind of want the same thing, so it's just kind of, it's not going to be an argy-bargy of whether we should do it or not. It's kind of like what's the best way to do it rather than, that kind of way. So yeah, the lads will be able to talk about that kind of stuff. We're kind of working through extended leases and stuff there at the minute, like so they'll come up and, the four of us will go meet landowners and, they'll be up maybe twice a year. They're up there, last week just to talk through figuring out the financial breakdown for 2025. So yeah, so we're very, very much so left alone. It's just a concept group. We're talking there.
There's a question, John Farrell has a question.
If you don't mind, and don't take the first one the wrong way. Did you consider New Zealand for an opportunity, or was it always Ireland? And then the second question as well to the three. Like, I'm a young farmer sitting here today, looking to get going. What's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I need to help me to get to where you are, I suppose?
Well, that's the worst one. Both of our mammies are down in the audience, but yeah, we actually we were probably 2 weeks away from booking a flight to New Zealand to go. There was a few opportunities that were going to come our way, potentially in Southland. So we were 2 weeks away from booking a flight to New Zealand when we found out that there might be an opportunity in Cantwell's Court. So
yeah, like we're lucky. We're just back from New Zealand actually. Well, we're back in Wood now, I suppose. But there's lots of opportunity out there for young people. And New Zealand isn't perfect, the same as Ireland isn't perfect. But there is great opportunity out there. Hopefully that, if we saw even a fraction of that opportunity come to Ireland for young people, we'd have a very vibrant dairy industry. But yeah, we did look at it, and it's a long way from home, and it's a different kind of lifestyle and stuff like that. And maybe if your goal was to own thousands and thousands of cows, New Zealand is probably the way to go. But we want to have a good dairy business, but we want to be close to our family and rear Irish kids and stuff like that too. So.
And in terms of advice for any of the young people in the audience of following in your footsteps, what would you say?
I suppose you can't get enough exposure to a farm. And one thing I found in Lakeland was you got exposure to some not so good farmers, and you maybe learned what you didn't want to do. But every time you drove into a really good yard, I'd come home that evening and I'd nearly be, you'd have a pep in your step and you're like, I'm going to do that myself. I loved the lifestyle, and it was those really ambitious farmers, and you'd see what they are doing, and you'd be nearly coming home ready to jump out of your skin to try and find something. Like, exposure to good people invigorates you, and you kind of get a buzz off it. So that, like, definitely, even like all of the conferences that you can go to, you can't get enough information. So definitely that, as what I was saying before, like, don't be afraid to start off on the bottom rung of the ladder. Like, if you have the ambition, like, employers will see that, and it may not be, you might start off in a job and you might end up moving to another farm, but like, you will be seen. There's no doubt about it. Like, the lads here are evidence of that. Like, they were doing really well in what they were doing, and then when Pauline James got the opportunity, they brought them on board straight away. Like, brought them the opportunity for a partnership. So like, good people will see other good people. So like, that's definitely one as well too. Yeah, I suppose if you want to go down the road of like owning your own cows, it's not a thing. You're not going to turn around in 25 and say, I'm going to buy a herd of cows in 26. Like, this is a long-term thing. You have to be thinking about it 4, 5, 6 years in advance, putting money away, like trying to have that track record, or whether it's like David said, buying young stock, buying calves and renting a bit of ground and getting yourself going, or rare young stock, and being in a position then to avail of an opportunity. And I suppose one thing about it, like, opportunities aren't going to jump up and hit you in the mouth. You have to go and search these things out. And like, the worst thing you can do is like, you go to a lad and tell him, well, you don't know, like, you get over that and you kind of go again. Like, more than any of us has got plenty of opportunities have come up, and for one reason or another it didn't work out. You just kept going and
person, and the deputy secretary,
Yeah, I suppose like what we do, you know, and we try and make it as simple as we can, but it, you know, it's made up of, you know, probably 5 or 6, you know, kind of core things that are very important. Like, you know, if there's a young person out there, you know, be able to, you know, measure grass or, you know, understand how pasture. You know, we see that with young people, and it's really disappointing that, you know, they don't want to work with the pasture base, or not even pasture base, but how, you know, a grass wedge works, different things like that. And, you know, let's get out there and see them things. And, you know, if there's a farmer near you that's measuring grass, you won't mind you going for a walk with him and, you know, come back and stick in the figures. You know, the stuff like spot the lane cow, you know, being able to measure, you know, just different things. And, you know, you'd be surprised at what you pick up. Like, that's where, you know, where I would have started. You know what I mean? It's, you know, what we do is, there's a lot of skills involved, and you have to start learning them. But, you know, they're all really important to just your success.
From our point of view, to add to that, I suppose what I really say to young people, in addition to what the lads have said, is surround yourself with the right people and build your own network and positive people. But view the people that you surround yourself with as key stakeholders in your business, such as your accountant is a very key stakeholder in your business, your relationship manager in the bank is a very key stakeholder, your co-op manager is a very stakeholder. Join a good discussion group. And as Christopher says, you're getting information from each of those people that you're building your own experience. I think we have another question from the audience.
Yeah, just a question there, and I suppose it's around land ownership going forward and that kind of thing. I think, in fairness to the lads sitting up there, they've made great strides, owning cows, getting involved in partnerships, that kind of stuff. But really, probably going forward, there's going to be more opportunities with land purchase. The concern I would see, I'm very fortunate, I grew up on a farm, have a farm at home, but for the likes of the lads up there that don't have a farm, you know, looking at the jumps and hoops they have to go through in order to get money, like 100 grand unsecured, you know, it's probably going to buy you 40 in calf heifers if you're lucky. You know, and Donal, you spoke there about other stakeholders having to make a big effort to just try and support these people. But I think also probably our banking sector is letting our young people down a little bit. I think that, you know, we were even just discussing that last night, you know, if a 200-acre farm comes up for sale, you know, 15,000 an acre, that's 3 million, then you have to then obviously have some development on it probably, and then as well as stamp duty, that kind of thing. You know, you're looking at quite a sizable amount of money that these young people are expected to put forward towards a farm, and at 30%, as well as having the ownership of the stock to go into that unit, you know, it's, you know, you're talking 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 million of cash that those people sitting up there have to bring forward into an arrangement. So I suppose that I would see would be a concern by young people going forward. I was on the same trip with the lads in New Zealand. They have a clear pathway when you start out to land ownership. And the general comment that we took away was, if you are keen enough and hungry enough, with the bank support and industry support, probably within 10 to 15 years you can own your own farm. We're nowhere near that. So I suppose the question, Donal, is like, you know, what are you doing to try and, I suppose, encourage young people to get to that level? Is that something that's on your radar? Because I think it should be, and I think we need to be creating those opportunities for the likes of those people who are leaders in what they're doing.
Yeah. Because we know the issue of succession in this industry, and if we can't encourage young farmers into the industry, we will have no industry, where the average age of a farmer in this country is nearly 60 years of age. And as I said earlier, the agri sector has been a very important sector to EIB, it's been a very good sector to the EIB, and it's a very important component to our overall SME lending. Our lending to agriculture, it represents nearly 30% of our overall SME lending nationwide. And indeed, when we look at some of our rural locations, such as the likes of a Carsaldine or Dunmanway or the Stone and the Stymond, it can be 70 or 80% of the business that we do in those particular branches can be 70-75% of the overall business that is done through agriculture or is directly related to agriculture. So again, there is, and I fully take on board what you're saying, there is an onus on us to ensure that we are supporting young farmers into the business and getting them going. I touched on what we can do in relation to unsecured finance. We also have, and we try to maybe leverage the SBCI finance as much as we possibly can towards the agricultural sector because of that high level of unsecured facilities that are available in it, €500,000. One of our recommendations to the SBCI, the pot of money that will be coming the next time, that we'll ring fence a certain percentage of that and make it available for farmers only under 40 years of age. So for argument's sake, in our next fund of money, if we're getting €200 million, that we'll ring fence 25-30% and it's only available to farmers under 40. That may not come to pass, but these are the initiatives that we are trying to make sure that there is access to finance available for young farmers. I suppose the one thing, and the cost of getting in and the large scale cost of getting in, and talking about the unsecured, typically where there's no track record of €100,000. We have a very good track record of banking new entrants by and large, but it's not 100% positive. And the last thing we want to do is lend a couple of €100,000 on an unsecured basis to find out within 12 months that the business plan, obviously paper doesn't refusing, that the farmer wasn't as efficient as the business plan thought or showed us or outlined it was, or indeed that the farmer decided after 12 months that actually dairy farming is not for me, and the attachment 7 days a week to milking cows, I've decided that I don't want to go down that route, and we don't want 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 euros go to a dairy farmer on an unsecured basis to find that out. You know, we'll do it under 100,000, we'll get an indication of how profitable, how efficient that dairy farmer, and as Christopher said, we'll go again after that because we know what we're dealing with then.
Donal, on value of stock owned, do you see any future where it can be used for security on loans? And then to David, Katie and Christopher, you're all looking at considering second units in the near future. Is there any other steps other than rare extra replacement peppers that you're taking now? And what are you looking for in a second unit going forward?
So I'll come in there first on the value or the value of livestock and taking the security. As mentioned, there's no legal framework to allow shackle mortgages to be in place to take livestock and security in this country. That being said, in any proposal, if a farmer is coming to us with equity in livestock that they've built up and they put their own money into, maybe buying in cow heifers or maiden heifers, that's obviously a major benefit to have and would be factored in, that it's an indication that this farmer has actually planned out where they want to go and put that plan in place maybe 12 or 24 months earlier than they're doing it. But at the moment, I suppose that framework isn't there. I suppose the question that you have to ask, farmers are borrowing 700 million every single year over the last 10 years. And if there was a shackled mortgage in place, would that add significantly? Is it a curtailment? It is in certain scenarios, but in the mass market, will it add significantly to the market of 700 million every year? And again, until we put the framework in place, we won't know that. The second half of the question.
On the second units, I suppose there's not as we're really doing it. Well, I suppose the thing is what we're trying to do, and I suppose we're kind of relatively new to the whole banking and taking on debt and stuff like that. So I suppose we're trying to figure out what our next step is in access and finance. I suppose, I suppose we're building a track record, and we kind of just need to figure out then what the best route is for us for finance. We can't. Like realistically, we won't take on a second unit without more bank finance. So it's kind of just, that'll be a big part of it. Having the stock and everything is great, but we probably do need a bank behind it. So I suppose it's us getting into the position that a bank will, a bank can back us, I suppose. Trying to, I suppose it's building a relationship with someone in the bank and figuring out our options.
Yeah, and I suppose we see our second unit as something that we might have to wait for 2 or 3 years. Again, we're not going to, jump on the first boat, but a big thing for us is that it's well set up. It's very simple, and in terms of managing it, we're on to something that has good milking facilities that you can bring in a relief milker, for one of the milkings, 5-6 times a week, and it just makes it a lot simpler then for us. In terms of the business that we're in now, I suppose I was saying to David, I can see the second unit kind of being, I suppose, my baby as such. That's the right term. The lads have gone into partnership with David, that was just for other reasons. And I wanted to come on board, but I think from talking to our accountant and stuff like that, the second unit is probably a better option for us. I suppose we both have very good skill sets as well, and it'd be good to be able to use that.
Yeah, I suppose the reason, we want to kind of grow we want to grow what free cash we throw off every year. It's the kind of, like the question there about buying the farm and stuff. We have a figure in our head of, this is what we kind of need every year to be in a realistic position to be able to buy a farm down the road. And it's kind of, that's our goal at the minute, to try and, get as close to that figure. We're not going to get there in the next year or two, but, hopefully in 5 or 6 years, potentially that's where we'll get. I suppose it's, I suppose I'm lucky that Katie is such an interesting farmer, and it'll allow us to do, it's great that the two of us want to do it, and having the backing of each other is massive to, for us to get to where we want to go.
And we're young and enthusiastic, that's the main thing. We're dying to get going.
One last question before we close, as we're under pressure maybe to be able to hear this. Everybody's going dancing to Dan McCain later on tonight. 2026, more difficult, challenging year, more than likely. What will you do different, or what are you actually doing now to prepare yourselves for 2026 and ensure that you're still trying to maybe build that bit of free cash flow?
We try and run the thing as lean as we can, realistically anyway. It's going to take probably the same amount of labour. I suppose, we were lucky during 2025, we bought a lot of our nitrogen for 2026, and we've extra feed and stuff on hand that'll, they'll be kind of, maybe pressure release valves or whatever during the year that'll help us. I suppose, a big thing for us, we kind of get dry spells and stuff like that, and we're going to try and, getting around that kind of issue is a big thing for us. So, we'll try on with reseed and stuff like that. We saw a massive bounce in the system this year with our reseeded ground during the summer, to stay going. Reseed was probably something that was put on the back burner with the previous owners, and we have a bit of catching up to do, stuff like that will, kind of just focus on the basics and, probably try and not feed as much meal and, different things like that. But we don't, I don't think we're spending money on stupid stuff as it is. There's definitely little efficiencies that can be got along the way, but yeah, it's fairly.
I suppose the meal thing as well, we don't feed meal unless we have to. So when we weren't in a joint situation, we were only feeding kilo a day, and that's where we want to be. Obviously, we're going to have these weather situations where we're just going to have to try and overcome it. And at the end of the day, the cow still has to be fed, and she still needs that, certain.
Yeah, and I suppose the important thing in 2026 as well, is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater either. We don't want to do things this year that will have an impact for 2 or 3 years down the road as well. That's the thing. So we'll still focus on the important, really important things, and maybe it's a good time for a reset to go back to basics. Around grass walks and watching body condition score, and just all of them really important things that can add value and save a lot of cost as well.
Sorry, just one more thing. Sorry, what I found when we first took over Canterbury Sport was that a big thing a lot of you aren't doing is, I don't think there's enough farmers shopping around. The price variance without losing value of the product, it's actually crazy, and it'll be massive on a year like this year coming. So make sure that you should be shopping around, and don't be afraid that you're going to put Johnny out because he didn't buy X off of him or Y off of him. Say it to him, I can get it for this price. Even if he came down, and he met you halfway, isn't it better than nothing? And that's what I found, yeah.
I'll leave the last word to Christopher, or happy now.
I think the big thing for us anyway, like Dave was saying, is not to change the system for 1 year. I suppose we're in a position now, we're in a good position. All our capex really has been completed. We've done a lot of work. We've 85% of the farm reseeded in 3.5 years. So we're probably in a position this year where rather than reseeding 22 or 3% of the farm, we can pull back to 10% or 7%. We put collars on the cows last year. That's the probably in a very good position that there's no major capital spend coming in 2026. And like that, I think 26 is just a year for getting back to basics. I think we were probably I think the first year I started, I fed about 670 kilos meal, and I don't know, I blame the hoppers, must be letting out more meal every time I press the button, but I think we fed about 900 kilos this year. So like, look, it's not extreme, but it's just clawing those little margins back. It's a ½ litre or a cent a litre on 5 different, like if you picked out your 5 key metrics, like whether it was, you know, feed, whether it was fertiliser, whether it was whatever your 5 key costs are, and if you could save a cent a litre or ½ cent a litre, suddenly you found yourself 2, 3, 4 cents a litre. I think just get back to basics and like really focus on the grass, because the grass is, you know, and I suppose it was very easy for me to sit here now, and I've been lucky enough to be on the other side of the table working with the co-op. At the times where you were back in the co-op, this side I maybe become a bit at it now this season versus, you know, when I was working with them. But like, for being on that other side of the table, you know, everyone sees the headline figures like Bacon made 20 million, whatever it was, and you know, thinks, oh, could be given more to the farmers. They process 2 billion litres of milk. That's a cent a litre. They pay a cent a litre wrong at any stage of the year. They're not operating, and then we don't have co-op. So to be fair to the co-ops, you know, they are supporting us. The market is returning what it's returning. We can't control that. What we can control is what's inside the farm gate. And like, I think if everyone here got back to basics, like what Lawrence and like what Nick were saying earlier, like grow an extra ton of grass, utilise an extra ton of grass, cut down the meat, cut down the lorries coming in and out, the reps coming in and out of the lane. I think, you know, and look, I think 23 was a very tough year for me starting. We were only in year 2 with a very, very young herd. Like, I look at 20, staring into 26 and versus staring into 23, I'm actually optimistic about where it is. Like, stock prices are relatively good. Fertiliser is not where it was 2 or 3 years ago. Like, it's not all doom and gloom. I think there needs to be a little bit of positivity about what we can do.
Folks, that concludes this session and concludes the conference, and I suppose all is to do for me is to thank David, Katie and Christopher for giving their time and effort and for being so open and honest. I think that they're an inspiration to the sector, and certainly for any young farmer there's steps to be followed under David, Katie and Christopher. So if you can show your appreciation. Close the conference, Colin, Liz.
Thanks, Donal. So Liz Duffy is my own name. I didn't introduce myself. I was the chair of the committee for today's event. So look, on behalf of myself and the committee, I want to thank you all very much for your attendance here today, and we really hope you had a great day, and of course enjoyed our social event last night with Paul Hyland and Michael Ward, which was a fantastic addition to the 2 days proceedings. So like last night and today obviously wouldn't have been possible without the ongoing support we get from Yarra. So again, to the team from Yarra, thank you very much for your ongoing support that you give to the IGA. And just as I move on to our speakers and those who put themselves up on the stage here today, I want to thank the session chairs. So we had Aidan, we had John Loughlin, and we've Donal from the last session here. Our 2 Teagasc speakers, Lawrence and Mick, gave us 2 insightful presentations for the key considerations for the year ahead. Thanks again to Donal from AIB for setting the scene from a banking perspective for us. I also want to give a huge thank you and well done to our farmer speakers, Cavan and John, in our second session before lunch, and Chris, Katie and David, who we've just heard from. We really appreciate all the time you've given us over the last number of weeks, but even more for the insights to your farm business and your career journeys to date. It's really commendable to see that you all have excellence in grassland management at the centre of what you do, and that's really at the heart of what the Irish Grassland Association is all about. So many thanks to our chairs and all our speakers for, as I said, for putting themselves up on the stage today. You might have noticed we have a cameraman here with us today. All the presentations and the sessions have been recorded, so those recordings will be shared with all members over the coming weeks. And again, finally, to the committee, thank you so much for all your help and support that you've given us to make the organising of today's event so streamlined. And that goes to Vinnie, our president, and the wider IGA Council who are here today with us today. I also want to personally thank our former council member Mike Egan for his support. And as always, we have to give huge thanks to Maura for everything she does behind the scenes, and she really is the oil that keeps the wheels of the IGA turning. So with that, I thank you once again for joining us today and wish you and your families a safe, healthy and successful year ahead for 2026. Just one or two pieces of housekeeping. If you could throw your name badges in, there'll be a box outside in the corridor there. And also, if you have any membership forms that you need to hand back, we'll pick them up. Maura will pick them up. So look, thank you so much for today, and we hope you guys had a great day out.